Hey, welcome back. We are getting ready to start our Missouri meal, which has actually been going since yesterday. But we will be making some barbecue burnt-ends, which are a Kansas City barbecue staple. We also made some Kansas City barbecue sauce for those burnt-ends. They will actually go on them in the cooking process, so kind of cool, and it'll be interesting to try that.
Really yummy.
Yep.
And then we're going to have some toasted ravioli, which sounds amazing. I'm pretty sure I've had it or something similar, but yeah, that's super, super yummy. And then we're also making a gooey butter cake, which we have never heard of or tried, so we're very excited to try that, and I hope it turns out.
Yep. Those are both known for the St. Louis area. So we've got one Kansas City and two St. Louis. So we've got both sides of the state. Kind of interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
So enjoy.
Yep. See you over here.
All right, we're going to start off with the Kansas City style barbecue sauce. We need a 14-ounce can of crushed tomatoes. Then we're adding 1 cup of ketchup. I don't think it matters what brand or what kind. We have 3/4 cup of brown sugar and a 1/2 cup of apple cider vinegar. Then I just went ahead and made sure those were mixing well together. Then we're adding a 1/2 cup of molasses. You definitely need to get something to scrape this out because it is thick and sticky. I just went ahead and make sure that molasses was getting stirred in. And then we're going to add a tablespoon of smoked paprika. Tap, tap, tap. And we are going to add some salt and pepper. A tablespoon of salt and 2 teaspoons of black pepper. Ground black pepper. Now this is 3 different things. 1 teaspoon of chili powder, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, and 1 teaspoon of onion powder. That's why I had the number 3. I was just making sure I remembered that was 3 things all together there. We also want to add a 1/2 teaspoon of red pepper flakes and a 1/2 teaspoon of ground mustard. And there we have it. Pretty simple. So what's the history behind this Kansas City style barbecue sauce and why Missouri? So it all started with a man named Henry Perry, who's often called the father of barbecue or the king of barbecue. He opened a restaurant in an old trolley barn in Missouri, in Kansas City, in the 1900s. After that, he trained a man named Charlie Bryant, who took over for him when he died, and then Charlie's brother Arthur took over from him. He's the one that added a bit of sweetness to the sauce, which is what we still have today with like that brown sugar and the molasses and things. And it's just this beautiful signature sauce, tomato and molasses sauce that we still use and love and enjoy today. So we're just letting this simmer for about a 1/2 hour, 20 minutes, and then it'll be ready. Just use it immediately, or you can store it in the fridge.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started on our barbecue burnt-ends. This was by far the most challenging thing I've made to date. And you'll see why as we kind of go along, and I'll explain a little bit about that. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually prepping the brisket. So you're going to use a large brisket, around probably 8 pounds. And in this, what I'm doing right here is I'm cutting off the hard fat. And then I'm going to also, from the other side, cut off some of the, there's kind of a fat layer that you'll see when I turn this over. And you want to cut quite a bit of that off. You want to get just a thin layer on there to protect the meat from the heat. And that will all render down and just make these burnt-ends really, really good. If you do it right. And again, burnt-ends are very difficult, so it may not end up that way for you. But if you're willing to give it a try, this was honestly one of the best meats I've ever tasted. Okay, so now here what I'm doing is I'm going to end up trying to cut out a little bit more of this hard fat here. And then I think if I do it here, I'm not quite sure, but I'll be cutting into the meat. And actually, I learned this afterwards. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to separate the point from the flat. So you can see how part of this is thicker, the part on the left here, now that I've turned it over, and that's the point, and that's the part that you're going to want to use for your burnt ends. Now I used the whole thing, and honestly, it all tasted really good. The flat will not be as tender because it's a little bit too thin, and it won't cook quite right. And there you can see we've got a little visitor over there in the corner. That's one of our dogs. Yeah, so again, you can see how there's this layer of fat here. You're just going to want to cut off some of that fat, make it a little bit of a thinner layer on here. Try not to get any of the meat like I did there. Obviously, you can see I don't have a lot of experience doing this. You can check out other YouTube videos to see how a professional would do this, and then use that if you want to do this with a little bit more authority. Or you could just kind of follow along with what I'm doing and just try your best, which is what we did, and it ended up tasting pretty good. So, which I'm pretty proud of because even on some of the things I was reading about, they said that hardly anybody can get this right. So I don't know if I got it right, but I think it tasted amazing. So I think I didn't do too bad. But anyways, yeah. So I will tell you a little bit about the history of burnt ends. And there's actually a documentary, which I will include the link for down below in the description. And if you're really interested in learning the whole history of burnt ends, you can go ahead and watch that. It's only 25 minutes long, and I thought it was pretty interesting. But just a short history. So, funny thing, they're called burnt ends because when they cooked the brisket, they would burn the ends of the brisket, and then because they decided that they didn't think they could sell that, they would just put it on a tray kind of to the side of the line for people waiting to get their barbecue sandwiches or things like that. And people would snack on it. And then a guy named Calvin Trillin, who was, funny enough, a writer for Playboy magazine, he wrote in one of his articles that the best part of um, Kansas City barbecue was these things that you didn't even pay for, these burnt ends that you could get while waiting in line. And then people read it and people started coming there just to get these burnt ends. And that's how they started. So you can see what I'm doing here is I'm cutting through that layer of fat to make that pocket. Again, traditionally you would cut all the way through and just use the point. But again, you can do the whole thing if you want. Just like I did. So I'll show you that. All right, now I'm going to season the meat. So we're going to use some oil to start with, just to help your spices stick better. You don't have to do this; they will stick pretty well without it. But I like to do it because then you'll know that you're going to get a really good, rich flavor out of your meat when you're done. And here I think I'm using canola oil. You could use vegetable oil. I wouldn't use an oil with a strong flavor on this because it will have a pretty strong effect. Well, I would assume it would. I don't know. I haven't smoked a lot of meat, so I'm kind of learning this with you guys. It may not, but either way, just to be safe, I would go with vegetable oil or canola oil. And yeah, you can see here I went ahead and rubbed it in. Just make sure that that oil coats the entire meat really well. And same thing on this side. And then I'm going to use kosher salt, black pepper, and garlic powder on the whole thing, on your sides, on both the front and the back, and your sides, and even in your pocket. You want to get a lot of salt, pepper, and garlic powder in the whole thing. Now, in this part, you don't actually want to rub it in because that will actually make you lose some of the flavor, and you don't need to when it's smoked like this. You'll have a good flavor either way. Well, you'll have actually the better flavor without rubbing it in because it will help form that nice black crust on the outside, and it will be part of that, and again, very, very good. So yeah, a little bit more about that history of burnt ends. So after Calvin Trillin had popularized it and people started showing up, restaurants decided, hey, wait a minute, if people want this, then we should learn how to make it. And so, through trial and error, And this was actually in the 70s when this first started. So this is a really new phenomenon. It hasn't been around about 50 years, which is kind of cool, but it's actually very difficult to make. And so, it took them a fair amount of time with experimenting to get the entire brisket to make burn ends, or, as I said before, the point at least. But I did, like I said, made it with both pieces, and it ended up tasting okay. And so there's the pepper that I'm using. Again, there's no formal amount. You're not weighing this out or anything like that. You just use how much you need to get the entire surface coated. Um, and so, yeah, then people started trying to make it, everywhere in Kansas City. And finally, they did end up perfecting it. And that's what you're seeing here is a really popular recipe. And the key and the reason why it's so hard is because you have to cook it at a low temperature for a very long time, and you can't ignore it for very long during that entire process. So it does take about 12 hours, I would say, for this size of a piece of meat to cook the entire thing. And I didn't quite get that entire time, and so mine probably doesn't taste quite like most people's would because the fat didn't have a chance to completely render out. And again, that's one of the things that people say is so good about the burn ends because all of the fat will render down and will liquefy, and it makes the meat just super tender, and it's got this really rich flavor. And yeah, it is very, very good. There's your garlic powder. So you can see we've got all three of our spices on there. And that is it. That's the meat prepared. So it's really not a lot of prep. It's not very hard. That's the easy part. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to see this going into the smoker. And here it is. Yeah, so this smoker, I'll actually have a link for this down in the description as well. This was a smoker made for portable things, campfires and things like that. It does not work for this. This brisket was 8 pounds. It was too heavy. You could see the smoker just kind of collapsed in the middle. It didn't work for this, but I would highly recommend it if you just want to smoke something on a trip or anything like that. I think if it wouldn't have been such a heavy piece of meat, it would have worked perfectly. And I was really happy with how it worked for the most part. And we actually cooked an entire brisket that way, and then once it got to a certain point, we ended up having to cook it on the grill the rest of the way. But yeah, I think, for other smoked recipes, it would be perfectly fine. So then we ended up getting this smoker, and there you can see the meat in there. You're spraying it with beef stock. You want to do that every 30 minutes for that first 6 hours that you're doing it. And then here you can see, so this is after the first 6 to 8 hours. And my meat did not reach the right temperature, which again is what I would say that my fat did not render out correctly. And so mine maybe wasn't completely accurate. But again, like I said, the flavor was amazing. So I cooked it the length of time. My smoker just didn't get hot enough, I think. And so there you see I have got it in the butcher paper, and I am wrapping it up. And then this, again, is what you're going to do after that 6 to 8 hour mark when your meat reaches 165 degrees. And it actually says spritz it every hour. So you just have to check the temperature, make sure you're staying right around that 225 mark, which, like I said, you really do have to be constantly watching, constantly checking your wood, making sure that you've got your good smoke, you've got the right temperature. Every hour you're spritzing. So yeah, then you're going to take your string or your twine, and you are going to be tying that all up in your butcher paper for another. You're going to take another 3 hours cooking it in the paper here, and you're looking for an internal temperature of 195 degrees at this point. So. And again, just put your thermometer right through that paper. That's how you'll get the temperature. I didn't get up to 195 internal temperature. I think I did get close. I think I got maybe around 170 or something like that. So, yeah, not too bad. There's a little dance. I was very stressed making this. It was again, like I said, very challenging. I've never smoked anything before this, so I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know what I should be looking for, and it was again quite a stressful experience. Plus, it just takes so long. I had to get up at I think like 5 in the morning in order to start this or something like that. Um, so yeah, there's that aspect of it too. But there you go. And then here it's fully cooked and we've taken it inside, and then you're going to cut it into cubes. You're looking for about an inch to an inch and a half in terms of your measurements for your cubes here. So you can see that it's about that size. You're looking for about bite size basically, because you're gonna roll these in your barbecue sauce, your Kansas City style barbecue sauce, which will have a link to that. I think we made it in our Missouri meal, and so you can watch it in that video. This recipe that we used for this one, we did use a different recipe. It was almost the same, but I think I like that recipe a little bit better. So I would have used the Missouri recipe if I was going to make this again. So there you can see we've got our barbecue sauce in the bowl. We're going to toss our meat in there, and you're going to get your meat completely coated in that barbecue sauce. And then once you've done that, then you will put it back into the smoker. Oh yeah, and we've also got, so this is a cup of Kansas City style barbecue sauce and a half cup of dark brown sugar here. So the brown sugar is also in there. And that is, oh man, so good, so good. So what the main thing to look for here is that you want to do this as quickly as possible. So I would maybe even when you do this, if you're going to go ahead and try this recipe, have multiple people, maybe at least 2 people, maybe even 3 or 4 people participating in this step so that you can do it as quickly as you can, because what you don't want is for your meat to completely cool off before you can get it back in the smoker, because you're going to want your meat to cook for the entire 1 to 2 hours at this point. Now we didn't have that much time. You can't really tell, but it was starting to get late by this point. So we did not end up having 2 hours, and when we finished it was like 8 o'clock or something like that. So, we were already done eating. We had to get something else to eat for the night. Yeah, this recipe was very stressful. So, but if you do it, hopefully you have a better smoker than I did, and you can have a set temperature, your wood will be more manageable, something like that. But yeah, my smoker was, we made it work, but it was a challenge. So we did not serve this with a slice of white bread, in case you're reading the recipe and you see that. I'm not sure what you would do with that. Maybe put it on there and eat it like a open-faced sandwich or something like that, but I think it's better just to eat it by itself. It tasted really good like that. So, yep, you can see, I don't know how much of this we're going to show of cutting up this meat, but I don't think we need to watch too much more. You're just going to keep doing this till you've got your entire brisket cut up like this. And you can kind of tell, so one thing I will point out here is that you can see how there's a little bit of a difference between the point, which is that thicker part, and the flat, which is that thinner part. So, they were very different in terms of how they were cooked. And I think that's why you would have the flat was a little bit tougher, because it doesn't have a lot of that fat, the same fat content as the point, which had a lot more of the fat in there, was a thicker piece of meat, and different things like that. I am going to try this again in the future, hopefully with a little bit of a better smoker, and maybe have a little bit of a better result with that as well. All right, finally done cutting all that up. It does take a while. Again, I would use multiple people. And then all we've got to do now is just toss that in the barbecue sauce and the brown sugar. Get that again really well coated because you want every piece to be completely covered so that every piece will have that caramelization on all sides so that each burn end is just amazing and delicious. And there it is.
We are ready to make our gooey butter cake. We're going to start with some warm water. Now this needs to be between 110 and 115 degrees, so very warm. And then we're using 2 tablespoons of that and 3 tablespoons of room temperature milk. The milk is just to help the yeast to have a little bit of sugar to activate. So we want to just whisk this together a little bit with our yeast, and then you're just going to let it sit for probably about 10 minutes. You want it to, you'll be able to tell when it's activated. It foams up. You can see some bubbles here, but it literally foams up. It looks like maybe the top of a latte cappuccino or something. So moving on, we're going to use our electric mixer here to cream together 6 tablespoons of butter. This is at room temperature, just makes it easier for mixing. So try to set it out ahead of time so you're not pulling it out cold from the fridge. And then we are going to put in 3 tablespoons of sugar. And that was also a teaspoon of salt. So we're going to go ahead and get the butter and sugar together and the salt. And then we'll add the egg. Gooey butter cake was actually first made on accident. It was in the 1930s in the St. Louis area. And a German immigrant baker was trying to make cake, but he kind of messed up some of the proportions of butter and flour and things, and it turned out to be more gooey than a regular cake, and it became a fan favorite. So here we're just going back and forth, alternating, adding flour. We're using a cup and 1 3/4 cup of flour, and then our active yeast blend that we let sit. So we're just going back and forth, like I said, alternating, making sure to scrape down, make sure everything's mixed in. And we were actually supposed to put that egg in before this. So just pretend that we did that. I'll put it in here in a minute, remember, but we're just going to beat this dough until it starts pulling away from the sides of the bowl, basically until it looks more like dough and not so sticky. Probably about 10 minutes. So we're just going to go ahead and keep alternating back and forth between flour and the yeast mixture, just making sure that that is really getting all blended in together well and making a nice dough. If it's still too sticky, you can always add a little bit more flour, and that's just fine. Now we're going to take this dough and press it down into an ungreased baking dish. This is, you can do 9 by 13, that's the size we recommend, at least 2 inches deep, and just make sure it's pressed down into the bottom of the pan, and then we're going to cover it and just let it rise for about really 2 to 3 hours. I'd let it go for 3 hours. So this is just something that you're going to want to make ahead of time and let rise with the yeast in the beginning, and then with this. Just make sure you have plenty of time. All right, we're going to go ahead and make our topping for the gooey butter cake. We're using 3 tablespoons plus 1 teaspoon of light corn syrup, 2 tablespoons of water, and 2.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract. This is the main difference between just the dough and the topping. So we're just whisking that, making sure it's all stirred together. it'll be really thick and sticky, and then when you mix it with the water, that will make it more liquidy. So for in our mixer here with our paddle attachment, we're creaming together 12 tablespoons of butter. Like I said before, it's easier if this butter is at room temperature, if you can take it out ahead of time. And then a cup and a half of sugar and a half teaspoon, of salt, and then our 1 egg there. So we are literally just mixing this together, making sure it's all creamed. And then just like with our dough, we're going to alternate with flour. We're using a 1 cup plus 3 tablespoons of flour, and then that liquid mixture that we just made, and just going back and forth. And then once that's mixed together, that's it. It's pretty easy. And here we go. I will let you see. Looks delicious. All right, so we've let our dough rise for about 2 to 3 hours. And then we're just taking our delicious topping that we just made and spooning it out onto the risen dough. And we're just going to make sure that that's, pretty even across. You can see the texture is kind of like a frosting almost. So that made it kind of easy to dollop out and spread evenly across there. Well, this is called Gooey Butter Cake. It is actually somewhat firm. You can cut it into slices. It's similar to like a coffee cake or a brownie even. And it is actually typically served as more of a coffee cake type thing rather than a dessert. We had it for dessert, and it was fine as a dessert. So we're going to put it in the oven and let it bake at 350 for 35 to 45 minutes. And you'll see that coming out right now. It's a beautiful golden brown, and it kind of has these wavy ripples on the top. That's totally fine. Looks amazing. And then once it cools a little bit, we're going to go ahead and sprinkle it with some powdered sugar. As you can see, I'm using a strainer just to help sift it and just make it go on there a little bit smoother, and looks really, really pretty. And it was delicious. Now it's time for some fried ravioli or toasted ravioli. So we have 2 tablespoons of milk, an egg, and that's our liquid mixture here. And then we have a 3/4 cup of breadcrumbs, a half teaspoon of salt is our dry mixture. So we thawed our frozen ravioli. We just got regular cheese ravioli. Dip it in the wet mixture, coat it with the dry mixture, and then we're just putting it in some hot oil to fry up. Toasted ravioli came about kind of the same way that the gooey butter cake did. It was an accident. So I guess a worker in a restaurant had some ravioli and accidentally dropped some into the fryer. He pulled them out, sprinkled them with a little bit of Parmesan cheese to try and salvage them, and then sent them out to the bar as just like a free appetizer. And the patrons that were out there loved them. So they started to actually make them. And another funny thing is they called them toasted ravioli because they thought that sounded more appealing, maybe more healthy than fried ravioli. And so this did happen in the St. Louis area in a predominantly Italian neighborhood. There's actually a couple different restaurants that claim that they are the ones where toasted ravioli first happened. So Hard to say. We don't know. But either way, they are delicious, and they are still something that's predominantly made and enjoyed in St. Louis, Missouri. So these only take a couple minutes, so definitely keep an eye on them. You're just watching for them to puff up and turn like a golden brown, and then we just put them out on this paper towel to drain. And you can sprinkle them with Parmesan cheese, like we said, and serve them with some warm marinara sauce.
Hey, well,
Hello.
we're done eating, and we're just enjoying this gooey butter cake that didn't quite turn out, but it tastes really good, so there's that. Same with most of the stuff in this meal. I feel like it wasn't exactly how we wanted it to be, but everything tasted really good, so I give it a thumbs up. Yeah.
At least give it a try.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, a lot of stuff went wrong today, and we didn't have all the stuff that we were supposed to have for everything. Yeast is really hard to find right now, so that didn't work out, and we didn't have a smoker, so we just made do and kind of made a little makeshift one, and that didn't work out because the meat was too big, and lots of problems, but you know, we persevered and used what we had, and
Part of life.
yeah, just kept going, and we came out with a usable product in the end, and it ended up being a good meal. So
The toasted ravioli was perfect. It was delicious.
it was good.
So, and that was easy. That's definitely something I would recommend doing. Obviously, it's not incredibly healthy, but it's fun and yummy. And we had some green beans with it. This didn't rise like it should have, but it tastes good.
Yeah, it was good. Yep. So yeah,
Do we know what we're doing next time?
our next meal is going to be in Kansas,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know everything that's part of the Kansas meal. I know we're doing bread. That's one of the things.
Some kind of bread.
Yeah,
And we're doing some kind of barbecue, aren't we?
maybe.
I think.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense. Might be some kind of Kansas City style barbecue. Something like that. But yeah, so I'm excited.
I thought this.
We'll be doing that in a few, coming up in a few weeks. So look forward to it. We'll see you then.
That was terrible.
Yeah.